It's just the penultimate episode. Hey, it's Romania Black. It's just the penultimate episode. No big deal. No big deal at all, right? Oh my God. I'm not ready. Last week's episode 23 is maybe my favorite episode of the series and one of my favorite episodes of anything that I've watched in a long time. And it's going to be hard to top that. It just really is. There's just no escaping that fact. It's so good. It's so good. So we're on episode 24 of Orb on the Movements of the Earth, the penultimate episode of the series. I've been slowly waiting to watch these episodes because I don't want the show to end, and that's kind of where I'm at this point. So I'm really sad that I'm watching this episode because I'm going on a trip next weekend, and so I'm probably gonna have to watch episode 25 sooner than I want to so that it'll be out on time, and that's just very sad. So but it's been such a journey, but we're not ready for those kind of words yet. No. I do want to talk about a couple of comments for episodes 21 and 22 before we start. And I will be continuing to read your comments in the Discord, on Patreon, and YouTube. So keep them coming because I really enjoy talking about this series. It's so much fun. I Swallow Apple Seeds 927 for episode 21 says, as an Orb fan for many years before the anime, I don't know when this manga came out. I'm going to look that up when we're done next week with this series. I think you're the first Orb fan I've ever encountered that's shipped Draka and Schmidt. Oh my God, look. I wear it as a badge of honor that I can introduce the world to new ships. Ships that you didn't know existed. Ships that you may or may not ever want to board. Ships that you may just watch pass through the night sky and go, okay, get out of here. I am happy and honored to be someone to introduce someone to a ship for the first time. It is a badge of honor. I'm glad I've started this. All ships are valid. So, well, most ships are valid. We're gonna, if we ever get to a ship that's not valid, I'll tell why and we'll talk about it then. But yeah, obviously Draka and Schmidt was like a ship mistake. A ship that was never meant. But I do appreciate that I Swallow Appleseed says, I get it though. The constant back and forth between Draka and Schmidt is one of the most stimulating parts of Orb in the second half. Look, see? Ships are valid. Ships are valid. Most of the ship art involving Schmidt is usually paired almost always with Free. Oh, y'all want that toxic angst. I see ya. I'm not a toxic-y person, so I'm like, yeah. I guess being the least Christian character and the most ride for die Christian character being paired together makes sense for a ship to gain traction. Toxic religious yaoi strikes again. Yeah, toxic yaoi I'm usually like hands off of, so that's probably why I did not ship Schmidt with Free, but again, I see it. Valid. I get people's points. Also, Schmidt had a smaller blade than Free in the fight. A rare small dick Sime and a hung uke moment. Just kidding. No, hey, it's not the size. We talked about it in the episode. It's not the size. It's how you use it. Right? Of course. In the discussion, you talked about how ideologies cannot be killed, and it reminded me of this documentary about separatist extremism, where one of the people the documentary interviewed, a soldier who fought against separatists, said in his own words, you cannot kill an ideology. You can only render it irrelevant. That is probably the scariest thing, and we are actively in our own world, in our own timeline, in our own cultures. I don't know where you are from watching, but I know where I am from watching, and I am seeing it in real time. People trying to render ideologies irrelevant, and it is very scary. And it's very poignant that we watch shows like this to remind us that ideologies are important. They cannot be killed, but we cannot let them become irrelevant. They need to keep being spoken up. They need to be talked about. They need to be heard. Because even as long as one other person hears, you keep that idea alive and you keep that spirit of it alive. As long as one other person agrees with you and is like, okay, yes. And that works two ways. It works two ways. It works with ideologies that are helping people and benefit equal rights for people, but it also helps ideologies that are doing the opposite. So it is a double-edged sword, but it's important that we just keep it in play, the ideologies that we know help people, and don't let them become irrelevant. So Very good words to say. I swallow apple seeds. Deep Raj, episode 22, says Novak feared heliocentrism, never realizing Yolanta was the sun all along. I love that metaphor. While her predecessors revolved, advanced, and moved history forward, and he stayed frozen inside his own little orbit. We love to see it! The cure was simple. Stop asking who must be obeyed, and start asking what continues to move even when you try to stop it. Episodes 22 and 23 are just peak cinema, as you would say. I love that. Thank you, Deep Raj, for imparting those words. And then Jav Gamer had this comment about episode 22. It's a little long, but I think it's worth noting. Also, what Draka and Antony were talking about with heliocentrism not being suppressed widely at the time was true. It took until the 17th century and everything with Galileo for the Catholic Church to deem heliocentrism as heretical. I adore Schmidt's final scenes, and it's one of my favorite parts of the show. We can see how both Schmidt and Draka have rubbed off on each other and changed their views. Again, the ship. During the ride in episode 18, Draka said she wasn't willing to leave important things to chance of a coin flip, but she was okay to give up control over the situation and accept the decision of the coin. And yet Schmidt was the one that couldn't accept it. Throughout his entire time we've known him, Schmidt focused on the idea that whatever happened in his life was the decision of his God. And when Draka flipped that coin, it wasn't that he didn't think it was the fate of God. The problem was he did think it was, but he couldn't accept it. He decided to go against the fate assigned to him and make his own choice. It's my personal belief that using the words or beliefs of something or somebody else is often a form of fear. If you delegate your decisions to another entity, then you don't have to weigh the options yourself and come to the decision that you have to then live with the consequences of. When you choose to follow something else, it takes anxiety and fear that comes with it out of your hands. And personally speaking, I think delegating your choices is not only dangerous, it's dishonest. You should be the one weighing, making your own choices, and taking that responsibility. However, like Schmidt says, this is a scary prospect. You no longer have a shield of safety to hide behind, and you're the one to take responsibility for all the good, all the bad that comes with it. But ultimately, it should be your choice and not the choice of anything else that dictates your actions. That's why the act of Schmidt flipping over that coin was so hype and meaningful to me. Absolutely, 100%. I mean, that's why people scapegoat others. It's just whenever you see groups of people scapegoat a minority party, it's because they're in fear of themselves being targeted. And so let's just detract that attention and put it on someone else that is less likely than me to be able to defend themselves. And then the attention's on them, and I don't have to have the fear of the consequences that come with that. It's a tried and true narrative device in stories, especially like I'm watching another series right now, Hunter x Hunter, and there's an episode where they talk about majority and how as soon as you get away from the majority, you are instantly targeted because the others have that security of the group mindset and you're on your own. So really you have to bear the consequences of your own actions a lot more than the group does. And it's, again, like with I Swallow Appleseed's comment, it's very indicative today. There are marginalized groups that are targeted and they feel like they have less of a voice because they're taking responsibility for their decisions and their beliefs. And meanwhile, there are other groups of people that are just doing the hive mind collective and they feel like they're less responsible because, well, everyone else agrees with me, so it must be right. I feel like Jav Gamer's comment for that episode is so poignant and worth mentioning and knowing about that just it gets me. It gets me. I'm real quick. We're almost to the 10-minute mark, but I just want to know real quick about when the manga came out for ORB. Just real quick. I just want a date. 2020. Okay. So it came out 2020. So that's 5 years ago. All right. Well, in 5 years, nobody had a Draka and Schmidt ship. So I'll take that. I'll take it. So Anyway, I'm super excited, y'all, but we need to get started. Now, when we last left off, we had met Albert, and Albert is someone who does not want to deal with anything involving science or, astrology or anything, but, he just happens to still have the astrolabe, so, he's kind of being called out on it. So I'm curious to get to know Albert a little bit more, so let's do that, shall we? We are going to start ORB on the movements of the Earth, and we are going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and I'll see you all on the other side. Okay. All right, this may be, for you watching at home, this may be the hardest week for you all because we have one episode left. We have one episode left of the series, which reintroducing Raffle of all characters, like last episode, it all made sense and it was very beautiful and poetic and everything. I have some thoughts about Raffle being introduced in this episode. I have some thoughts about it. I want to try to reserve as much of my overall judgment of this decision to bring Raffle back into it until the very end of next episode. So I'm saying this to please, in the Discord, please spoiler tag your thoughts about this episode for me. Please spoiler tag, because I want to wait until episode 25 is out on the channel. I've got my thoughts out on that episode. Please spoiler tag down below. I don't want explanations. I don't want your theories until after next week. So there might not be a lot of comments about this episode, and that's fine. I fully understand that because I'm very torn about introducing him. I'm going to talk a little bit about my thoughts, my theories, what I'm torn about, but I'm going to reserve overall like what I think is going on until next week. And then afterwards, we can talk in the comments and theorize about it and whatever. But part of my channel is giving my unfiltered emotions. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And my dog is going to demand that I throw this toy while I'm talking to you all. So we just have to work with that too. But I like Albert's character. I've got some screenshots I'm going to pull up with you all. I like Albert's character. He reminds me of Bertolt from Attack on Titan, which I think that Raffle's voice actor, the adult or grown up, because at the very end in the ED, you see that the dad and Albert and Raffle are the same height. And I'm like, okay, so Raffle is an adult in this version. We're going to talk about it in a little more detail later. He's an adult in this version of it. Him having the same voice actor from a kid to an adult is a choice. It's kind of like Armin from Attack on Titan, which is why Albert looking like Bertolt reminded me of it, but it's fine. It's okay. But yeah, we're going to get to that. We're not there yet there. So the baker, we find out the baker is not Albert's actual father. He's just taken him in as an employer, but he kind of cares for him like a son. And he's like, why haven't you thrown away your astrolabe? And the answer is Albert does love learning. He wants to learn. But because of what's happened, which I'm assuming we're going to find out next episode, because of that, he has a lot of doubts, which we're going to talk about him and his dad in comparison, a lot of doubts about learning now, and he wants to try to push it back. But look, pushing back stuff that you're good at and stuff that you're interested in is just going to make you miserable. So it's like, you might as well just do it. In the words of Nike, just do it. And I think that that's what's going to lead to with Albert, but we're not there yet. But I thought that, however, there were a lot of things this episode did that called back to the themes of this entire series that I loved. And the first one was this bread baking analogy where the baker's like, I told you that I baked bread according to your calculations, but I actually lied. I've been altering it. The truth is I've been baking batches that are a little higher quality than what your calculations or your figures predicted. And the small changes to the recipe or the way that it's sifted can change the taste. So this entire conversation about the bread making is indicative of the whole point of the show, which is to say that the baker, he took his own knowledge, his own passion, and then he took the research that Albert had given him and he altered it to make it better and to fit what he knew and his experience, and it created a new, better outcome. And it is a gamble, as it's pointed out, but the gamble paid off. And I'm like, that's exactly what happened with Bodini, what's happened through Hubert. About call him Herbert. Hubert, what happened through Raffle, what happened through Aksha, what happened through like Draka, what happened through everything. It's just taking what you are good at, applying it to what has already existed, and then it creates something that's better than its predecessor and maybe more closer to the truth. So the baker took Albert's calculations of making technically good bread and then altered it with his own experience, passion, and know-how and his own intuition, and got closer to the truth of better bread through doing that. And it's just a metaphor for the theme of the show, which I think is just really well done. And he's like, and I didn't have to raise the price. And Albert is a little bit like you took my calculations and you didn't do them exactly. And he's like, well, do you know why I would take such a risk? Because baking bread is what I love. And it's like, if you love something, you take risks with it. And if it pays off, great. And if not, you still love that thing, so you're going to go back to the drawing board and try it over again. And I love this whole time they're having this conversation, the candle is in the background, the knowledge, and in this shot, it's on the baker's side, the knowledge is, so it's a little symbolism of that. This show, even up until the penultimate episode, is just, and when you cut back to Albert, there's no candle that's lit, which is indicative that he doesn't have the correct knowledge in this moment. Love it. Absolutely love it. It's great. So yeah. So he's like, well, why? He's like, you have this. And he talks about Aristotle saying that apparently this baker knew Albert's dad. And he's like, it's, you're lying to yourself if you're not, giving into your passions. Your father told me something long ago. A wise man in some far place, Socrates or Arrow something. I was like, I do love this though. All things have an arete. All things have an arete, an inherent potential. Seats are to be used to sit on. Bakers bake bread. I love this conversation and this analogy and the representation that it has, that everyone has a talent. We all have a talent. It's figuring out what that talent is and then maximizing that potential to do what we love to do and do it well, right? I advise students at a college setting, and it disheartens me a little bit because of how capitalist our society is right now, that kids, they're like, oh, I want to be an influencer because they make money. Or I've never had a student honestly tell me they want to be an influencer. I think they just don't want to tell an adult like me that because they know what I'm going to say. But a lot of times students, they'll be like, oh, I want to be a nurse. Or I want to be an engineer. And sadly, when they tell me that, I'm like, well, why do you want to be a nurse or an engineer? For nurses, granted, I don't want to, misconstrue. There are a lot of students that are like, I want to help people. And I'm like, well, yes, then you will be a good nurse. If your passion is in helping people, you will be a good nurse. But sometimes people are like, oh, they make lots of money. And I'm like, that's not why you should do it. And then they'll be like, I want to be an engineer because they make tons of money too. And I'm like, Then I ask them, I'm like, are you good at math and science? And they're like, no. And I'm like, and I just tell them outright, I'm like, then you're not going to be an engineer because they have to use math and science all the time. So if you can't do that, I would love to be a doctor because I could help people and yeah, the money, but I can't do math. So that's just not in the cards for me. It's not going to work out. And I always tell them the story when I was in grad school, there was a woman, she was probably in her 30s at the time. And I was like in my early 20s and she was there. And I was like, why are you in grad school? Like, what did you do for a living? And she's like, I went to law school and became a lawyer and I did it for the money and I knew I was smart and I could do it. And then when I started getting to the job, I hated it and I hated my life. And I thought, I want to come back and do what I want. And she went into children's literature, which I was like, that to me at the time, I was like, that's a gamble. Where are your job prospects? But she's like, I just love kids lit and I want to do it. And then she got a job at like the Smithsonian years later and it all worked out. So, but the point of that story is that you can do something that you think is going to be lucrative. But if you hate your life, what's the point? Like, you're only on this earth once. Do something you enjoy. And obviously you have to make money to survive. We live in a capitalist society, but you can find, if you have a talent, I guess to get to the point here where this bread maker's like, I have a talent of making bread. I know I can make money doing that because I'm maximizing my potential and people will come to me for the bread. I know what I can do. I know people will come for me for that. That is what I do. And if you love teaching and you know you're a good teacher, then the jobs will come to you. If you are good at a job, you will find employment. If you're passionate about it and you're good at it. It may not come quickly, it will not come easily, but if you are persistent and you find your niche, it will work out. But you have to be able to, in today's economy, you have to be able to sacrifice. You have to be able to take some shit jobs for a while until you build up your resume and get that opportunity. You may have to struggle for a while, but if you can tough it out and make it work and keep on being persistent and passionate and not lose hope on that, then there is a good chance you'll find a job that will be something that you can be satisfied with along the way. And I know that's optimistic and some people are like, but I do like the Aristotle's idea that everyone has something that they are good at and that they have potential. And it's humans' ability to think, which kind of ties into Albert. Albert is basically trying to reject Aristotle's arete. He has this ability to think and he loves it and he loves learning and he has a good mind, but he's trying to reject it based on his past experiences. And that's such a disservice. And the baker is trying to tell him that. He's like, there was another idea that this Aristotle, something or other, human beings are happiest when they delight in what is best suited for them. The things that interest you are the mission that God has granted you. And I love that too. I think when people try to denounce science or things like that, I'm like, God gave us a brain to think. He gave us a brain to be able to think and come up with these amazing things and connect ourselves more to the universe. Why would you deny that? Why would you not want to feed that? And I think that we're going to talk about the dad versus Raffle. The dad is painted very sinisterly in this episode, which is interesting. So is Raffle in a few moments. And I'm like, okay. But I feel like that each of them bring up good points and I want to talk about those. But I like the baker here saying, this is how you remain true to yourself, right? Dive in while you're still young. Yes. All the time, I feel like students I talk to, they're trying to grow up so fast. I'm like, savor your youth, honestly. But also while you're young, experiment and figure out what you're good at. Don't just settle for a mediocre job when you're young. And then by the time you're older, you're like, oh, I think I'll experiment now. I'm like, no, experiment while you're young. Do it while you have an able body and can do that. He's like, no one will complain about that. And then Albert, he's like, the last part wasn't quite right. Albert starts to interject. He says, a lot of people might complain, but it doesn't matter. Move forward. Yep. Anyway, it's up to you. And so, yeah. And so that inspires Albert to go back up and look back at the stars. And I love the idea. That shot of him might be the thumbnail. I love that it's similar to Aksha, where he's looking up at the stars and pointing up at it, but he doesn't want to look because of his fear and because of something that's happened in the past that I thought we were going to find out this episode. I thought we were going to discover what had happened to him this episode, but apparently that wasn't in the cards. So we're going to have to wait and find out. We're going to have to wait and find out later. And I'm like, ah, damn it. So we're going to have to wait and find out later. But I like that he's like halfway looking up. He's still looking up. He's not like Aksha. He's still looking up. He's not totally afraid. But at the same time, he's not fully committed. Like he's out to the side as he starts to trace Sagittarius. Now, there's this shot of his dad. I wanted to pause on it. His dad gets killed. His dad is killed. And it's like, okay, did Raffle murder him? Did Raffle kill him? Did someone else, did an Inquisitor come and kill him? What happens? I thought we were going to find that out this episode. We don't. And I'm like, so we got to wait and see. But okay. So as he's starting to trace, that's what causes him to doubt. And that shot there, it looks like Banksy artwork, honestly. But that shot there where he can't finish it because whatever has happened has traumatized him to the point where he doesn't want to learn anymore. We don't see Raffle anymore. So I'm like, I'm so curious. I'm so curious to see where this goes. And then we have the intro. The intro is great. I love Mappa's commitment to, or not Mappa, but I love the commitment of this studio to change things up at the last minute. It's Madhouse, not Mappa, but I get my M's confused. The fact that he has the necklace at the end is interesting. Also want to go back to the shot Raffle there. the shot of, I commented on this in the last episode, but Raffle looks so much bigger in that scene because that's him as an adult, and then there's Raffle as a kid to Novak. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this quite a bit. But yeah, so the baker sends Albert, THAUMAZEIN is the name of this episode, which gets a definition in this one. So the baker gives him directions to a church that's a little bit off the beaten pathway. And he goes there, and there's this beautiful cathedral-style church. It's very beautiful. It's gorgeous. Catholicism, we've talked about, I think I don't know enough about religion to know what form of Christianity was being purported in the prior episodes of this series. Here, this seems like early Catholicism. I want to know, when did the confessional booth in churches start? When did they start? On the wiki page for a confessional booth, it said that they dated back to no further than the 16th century. So around the 1500s, around that time, is when they were started to be used. So, okay. So they are pretty modern. So this kind of maps out with it being like one of the first times that it's used is the confessional booth. That's interesting. I thought confessional booths were around way earlier than 500 years ago, but apparently not. So cool. So he goes into the confessional booth, and I want to try to find, the priest is there, and the priest looks older. Like, they have wrinkles, they have lines around their face. I'm like, who are you? Who be you, priest? What is going on? And this priest is kind of eccentric. He's like, well, just come down, sit down, and talk with me. I'm the priest. It's my new contraption, this confessional booth. Now also it realizes that every time I watch a reality TV show and I see a confessional, I'm like, it's wild how those types of situations have morphed and evolved and kind of been extrapolated and used in other like forms of media that are non-religious. It's interesting. I admire your bravery in setting foot inside. I liked this priest. I thought he was interesting. I thought his approach to talking to Albert was really, I don't know if inclusive is the right word, but the priest is like, hey, I'll tell you something about me. You tell me something about you. You know, his conversation didn't feel as heavy as you would imagine a priest talking to somebody in a confessional booth would be. He's just trying to, it almost felt more like a therapy session, to be honest, than it did a confessional. I'm like, are we having a therapy session? But yeah, the idea of setting inside this like box to confess things to a stranger, the idea, it's almost also putting, I don't know if it's supposed to represent putting trust in the universe, trust and faith in someone else that you can't see. It's an analogy for God. If you can trust in confessing your sins to this unknown force, it's kind of an analogy of trusting, you know, having faith in God for confessing to them. So it's sort of a representation of that. Or at least that's how I take it. The sacrament of penance. I want to look that up. Sacrament of penance. Okay. Sacrament of penance was in the Catholic Church. And it's where they received God's forgiveness for sins committed after baptism. Okay, the sacrament of penance. Here we go. It was instituted by the church for forgiveness of sins after baptism. I was looking to see if there was like, okay, so it was around the 1500s too. So it was an early church practice as well for Catholics. Okay. Good to know. I also looked up the voice actor for Albert. His name is Shoya Ishige. He's actually a really recent voice actor. He only started voice acting. His earliest time was back in 2016. So he's been voice acting for about 10 years, which is still quite a bit. But he's been in the series Orange, which I want to see. He's been in ReZero, which I've been recommended. He's been in some other series that I do not know. My Dress Up Darling, I want to see that eventually. He's been in that. Devil is a Part-Timer. My brother really likes that series. He's been in that one. My Love Story with Yamada-kun at level 999. I do want to see that eventually, but he's like a side character in that. So yeah, And then Undead Unluck, he's been in that series. But yeah, most of the series I don't know. He's in Anne Shirley, which is the newest remake of that anime. So good for him. I don't know Shoyo Ishige very well. I want to know who Albert's dad, VA, in ORB is. Who is his? Albert's father in ORB is voiced by Taiki Yamashita. He is in a lot of recent things. I'm trying to see if he's in something. Oh, wow. He voices a lot of other characters in ORB. He voices the Liberation Front fighters, one of the heretics in episode 19, a heretic in episode 16. He was just there doing all the voices. They're like, you want to stick around and play a dad? And he's like, sure, will do. What else has he been in? Okay, he was in Rurouni Kenshin. He voiced like 8 people in that series. They're just like, you want to stick around? You got a great deep voice. What else do you want to do? He's in Spy Family. He's in that one. He's in Records of Ragnarok. He's been in a show called Bikini Warriors, was like his first role back in 2015. He also voices multiple side characters in My Hero Academia. Wow. I mean, kudos. I give props. He also voices civilians and governmental agents in Jujutsu Kaisen. Major props to this man, Taiki Yamashita. I have a lot of respect for the side character voice actors who are like, I'm just going to voice all these people and do my due diligence because somebody has to do the job. Good for him. Good for him. So yeah, my one thing is, whenever we got the close-up of the priest's head, like he has hair that's like blondish up there. And what I'm going to say later is going to make this kind of null and void. But the preacher, I'm like, is the preacher the blonde from back when Novak, is the preacher the blonde man that Novak was trying to influence alongside the guy that dies saving Yolenta? And this is him as an older man. And now he's passing on, like his partner was like, we need to do what's right and all this. And he's like, I'm just following the code and following the system. Is this him kind of like having penance of his own? That would be a really cool twist, because I kept waiting for that blonde Inquisitor to come back into the fray and into the storyline, and he disappeared. So if this is him, that would be pretty bitchin'. That would be really cool. Or if that's going, okay, I am under a crazy assumption. I mentioned this in the reaction. I'm like, are we in a parallel world? Are we in a different reality than we were the other 23 episodes of this series? If we are not, and if this is the same world, then I have thoughts about Raffle. And if it's not a parallel world, and if we're still going in the same world that we've been in the entire time, then this guy being the one Inquisitor that Novak worked with that we never saw after Yolenta's death, if it's him, that would be really cool. If we are in a parallel world where some of these characters did not die and ended up living and going on to do other things, then could this be Bodini? I don't know. Seeing the top of the blondish hair, I'm like, maybe it's Bodini. And that would be an interesting concept. So I don't know. We're going to talk about it here in a little bit. But Albert is very hesitant to confess his sins, and he's like, no, he's like, I don't want to do this. He's like, you're my first visitor, so my nerves may be on edge as well, but this is a precious opportunity. Do you even have one worry? And he's like, I do have one. And so he says his worry there, I'll get that. He says the desire to know things is nonsense, which I felt so bad for Albert saying this, because I'm like, my dude, it is not nonsense. Your trauma is trying to tell you not to do these things. I felt bad for him. So he decides to leave the bread and leave. And the priest says, I'll tell you a secret worry of my own when you're finished, which is not how I think confessionals usually work in modern sense. So I'm like, this felt more like a therapy session, or like a little chit-chatty between, a little gossip between each other. And I do appreciate the equivalent exchange of it all, where the priest is like, if you tell me your confession of your worry, I'll share mine, a secret worry of my own, meaning that the priest has multiple worries. He's like, I'll share some of mine if you share some of yours. Come on, it'll be fine. I'm like, okay. And that convinces Albert, being like, well, I might as well. Basically, he's like, fine, I succumb. I'll give in to your demand for exposition and backstory. So then we get into his childhood. He's like, did something happen when you were a child? He's like, I remember it by heart. And we start talking about what his dad told him. His father said, my son, we are forced to endure a hard life. But there are many others whose lives are much harder. At the beginning of this, when he was talking about the dad and what his dad was telling him, I didn't disagree with a lot of this. I thought a lot of what the dad said was really true and valid and worth mentioning and bringing up. Because, yeah, we live hard lives, but it's harder for others. I said, there are those that say farmers like us don't need education. Coming from a rural background, my family are farmers. My family have grown up as farmers, and I have grown up in the agricultural sphere here in the U.S., and so I could not agree with that more. I think that there is a stereotype that people in agriculture or farmers are dumb. I think there's a stereotype that says they are dumb and just hard workers and they don't think about anything. And I'm like, no, that is not true. They're hard workers. And I think the way that people in agriculture think, especially like actual farmers, like not corporate, because then you get in a whole nother world, but like real down to earth farmers, when you talk to them, they have certain beliefs because of the way they were raised. They have certain beliefs because of kind of the pragmatic nature of what they do day to day. They are somewhat desensitized based on the death that they see through livestock and through things like that. Farmers have a higher risk of suicide and self-harm because they're taught a mindset of it's really hard. We don't have time to worry. Buck up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and move on. And so mental health is considered like attention to mental health can be considered a sign of weakness in that community. So there's a lot of things that are sort of ascribed and built into that culture that are very hard to break because they're part of its fundamentals. And so I feel like, though, I've talked with enough people that are really educated in agriculture, but it can appear not that way because of the cultural mindset that community of people have. And there are people within that community that I disagree with fundamentally on a lot of their beliefs, on their politics, everything. But I disagree with them heavily, but I get where they would find that belief, even though I don't ascribe to it myself. So I do agree farmers need to be educated. They really do. But he's like, that's not the case. If every person grows smarter and we work together, then someday surely we can create a world where no one suffers and we all live comfortably. That's the idea. That's the utopia. The problem is that some people have figured that out as well. And they're like, oh, but I don't want them to be equal to me. Greed is a monster. Greed is a monster. And that's, what stops it. So he was fortunate enough to earn praise from a village elder that allowed him to become able to read. So he gets all these books and reads, and he teaches Albert to start reading as well, which I assumed Albert was like 8 or 9. That's the age that I assumed he was in this episode. I don't know exactly how old he is, but that was the age I was determining. So he started to read at an early age, and he and Astrolab and I would record observations with it every night. And the preacher asked, did you enjoy observing the heavens? That's what gave me like a Bodini feel. It's like, did you enjoy observing the heavens? At first I wondered if it was Ash, but I'm like, no. And then with the blonde that was the Inquisitor with Novak, I'm like, yeah, it could be him. But this astrologer, the priest having a connection to astrology, I'm like, is it Bodini in a parallel universe? Are him and Aksha okay? Are him and Aksha happily at home together in this parallel world? I don't know. So he's like, back then I did. And he looks up, I look at the night sky and be obsessed with it. I know, I was just talking to my hairdresser the other day. I go see somebody to get my hair cut and colored. And she's like, I just sat outside and just looked at the sky for like an hour. She's like, I just really loved it. Some people just love it. It's part of who they are as a human. And he's like, and I realized that the star. Now, I want to talk about the dad. I agree with some of the things that he says. But then we get to this part here where he goes to he's like, I made a surprising discovery. And the dad's like, oh, what did you find? He's like, oh, I discovered this one star that doesn't move. And he's like, well, that's called Polaris. And he's like, oh, wow. And he says, now listen, my son, what use does that discovery serve? The dad in this part here is a bit, I get that he's strict, and there is an underlying, based on what we've seen so far in this series, of when children learn knowledge, they don't exactly know the social cues of society. So when they engage with adults with this knowledge they've learned, they put themselves at risk of, as we've seen in the series, being labeled a heretic, or worse, getting the dad labeled a heretic and the son labeled a heretic, and then everybody dies. So in a sense, I was like, okay, is the dad trying to protect Albert by making sure he knows, hey, you can't just run around everywhere telling everybody all this stuff. You'll be labeled a heretic and it won't be good. But we don't exactly know the timeline, or if this is a parallel world, doesn't matter. And so he's like, well, what are you talking about? And he's like, for example, a star that doesn't move is very useful for navigation, like a map of the sky. So the dad is trying to apply a practical application for knowledge, being like, everything you learn needs to have a purpose. Why did you learn that? Did you learn it to help you understand things like a map? Discoveries are useful when they have meaning. And Raffle later on revokes all that, and he's like, no, you don't have to have meaning to learning anything. You can learn it if you want to. And I feel like it's two movements of thought. There's the whole, like, some people learn and they're like, there has to be a reason I'm learning to do these things. If not, it's useless information and you don't need to know it. And then there's another camp of people that are like, all learning is valid and all learning makes you a better person and a more well-rounded person. And who gives a shit what you learn? If you like it, learn it. And it's like, yes, you can see both sides of the story. Your brain only has so much capacity, but I like the unrestricted side of learning that Raffle kind of purports, which is interesting because the dad hired him to be a tutor. So I'm like, how is this going to go when you discover that your tutor is sharing this with your son? He's like, without that, they're a waste. And then he gives him the head pat, but it was like the most sinister head pat in the history of head pats. Like, it made you think he was going to smack that kid. And instead he's like, no, you did great. I'm proud of you. It's still, the dad is framed as the villain in this scene. But what's ironic and kind of weird is that Raffle is also framed as kind of a villainous character in this episode. A little bit. We're going to talk about it. I was like, it leaves you with a very, this episode left me very kind of concerned for Albert. And I honestly thought we were going to get answers as to what happened, but we didn't. And I'm like, we only have one episode left. What else are we doing in the next episode? It's crazy. And he's like, what do you want to know? And then Albert's like, I want to know everything about the sky, mainly about astrology. He's like, there's so much. And then when he says, why do you want to know? That shot instantly frames the dad as like a villainous character. But he's like, he's like, why do you want to know all these things? And Albert's like, because it's interesting. I thought that this was going to be a moment where the dad talks about the heretics and the inquisitors and was like, you need to be careful. Do you know what you're doing? Et cetera, et cetera. You could get yourself in trouble. But he's like, I don't know why. And then he's like, I want to know. And he's like, it's your own desire then. And he says, from now on, whenever you learn, and he says, remember this. And this part is the polar opposite of Raffle. He says, you must doubt. And Raffle says, you must believe. And they're framed exactly the same way. We're going to see it here in a second. But they're framed exactly the same way to Albert. That they're both positioned. You must doubt. You must believe. And it's really like the two sides of the religious coin. There is like the side of religion, which oddly enough, and I know I didn't bring Whiteboard Coon out. I'll bring him out next week, I promise. But there's a side of Raffle where Raffle kind of talks about more on... It's interesting because Raffle we've always associated in the series up until now as being someone that believes in himself and his own convictions, but is tied very little to religion, or at least in comparison to Hubert, in comparison to Bodini, in comparison to Aksha, in comparison to others. Raffle's a less religious person. But then you have in this, I've got something in my eye. In this, though, Raffle is literally like simultaneously tying to, you have to believe that you want to learn and believe in the things you do learn. Oh my God, my eye. Okay, now I got that out of my eye. I was like, man, bleh, Raffle's trying to curse me from beyond. But yeah, so you have Raffle. It's interesting that he for being someone that we haven't tied as being the most religious of all the characters, he kind of is. When you like, the act of believing is an act of faith, but it's also like a personal faith as well. You have to believe in yourself, but you could also tie that to religion if you wanted to. Whereas the dad is tying it to like the way we viewed religion through the eyes of those that were afraid of the heretics, and through Novak and stuff in doubting, right? So, and Aksha is tied to doubt and how he started out until, you know, he met Bodini and Gross and the others. So it's interesting to see those two sides of the coin, right? May says you need to doubt even motives and means. The pursuit of knowledge can grow beyond control. Whereas the dad is pointing out the dangers. The dad was feeling very Malcolm from Jurassic Park. He's like, just because you could doesn't mean that you should, you know? He very much seemed like you need to be careful because ambition can lead to things spiraling out of control. And that containment is tied to religion as well. Whereas Raffle is like, oh, hell no, let it go. Let it grow. You have so much potential. Why would you limit yourself? Let it spiral out and see where it ends. And so it's kind of like control and chaos and trying. This poor kid's like 8 years old, trying to understand, you know, do you pursue control or chaos? Now, I do agree with the dad when he's like, if it gets to be a monster, it can do irreversible changes to the world. AI. So I think that there is some truth to that, where some people just let their ambitions and pursuit of knowledge spiral out of control without thinking of what it can do to others. And regardless of how you feel about artificial intelligence, the fact of the matter is the resources that our pursuit of enhancing AI is doing is destroying our world that we only have one of. And it's destroying it for the pursuit of this thing that they don't even understand fully. And so there's a lot, and that change, if we don't do something about it, can become irreversible. So I'm like, the dad's not wrong in saying that, but the way he's going about it is also combining with some of those ideologies we've talked about in this series. He's like, take time to doubt the path that you're on. If it doesn't serve humankind, then go no further. Now, I would question this part here, because I think part of what he's saying is always be in doubt of what's happening. You could tie that to what Yolenta tells Draka a few episodes back. Yolenta's like, if you keep with your convictions no matter what, it will cause your demise. And Novak is like exhibit A of that. But I don't think Yolenta would agree with the dad in saying if it doesn't serve humankind, then go no further. I think that Yolenta would kind of be in between the dad in this episode and Raffle in this episode. She'd kind of be in between there, saying like, always wander, but also wander because you want to, and feel free to wander anywhere you want to. Whereas the dad is like, wander on this specific pathway, right? And poor Albert, this is literally like, he's just like, okay, I'm an 8-year-old kid. This was a lot to spring on me at once. And he's like, if you keep wanting to learn, this isn't just someone anyone can have. You have to show proper gratitude to God. And that's the son does like that same gesture. He's so precious. Baby Albert's so precious. Look at him, this precocious little kid. And he's like, I'll get you a tutor. That's when I met him. Oh man, so this is the tutor I told you about from before. And then he shows up and he's like, his name is Raffle. And he looks exactly the same, just in bigger form. And he's just older. Okay. So, let's talk about this. I have a couple train of thoughts. Again, we have to wait till next episode. So what I'm about to say is just, my mind is still kind of baffled that they went this route. On the one hand, if I have thoughts about this being a parallel world, because I was trying to figure it out during the reaction, and I'm like, okay, but he drank the poison. He was on the stake, going to be burned. They clearly checked to make sure he was dead. So unless he was smart and gave himself a tonic that just put him into a coma, I'm thinking of Apothecary Diaries. There's a scene in that series that does something similar. Unless they did that and then someone like picked him up off of the pike before he burned, but that guard put the flame down and he burned up. Like, unless certain circumstances happened to where Raffle could have been saved, then this is not Raffle, the 12-year-old Raffle. And at first, my mind was trying to trick me. I was like, was he 15 or 16? No, he was 12. So this is clearly a different version, because this Raffle looks like he's 25. So even then, the ages and the voice and stuff doesn't match up. And I'm like, So I believe that Raffle is dead. The 12-year-old Raffle that we knew is dead. I believe that. Whether or not the show is going to leave that ambiguous for us or not, I don't know. I think the 12-year-old Raffle is dead. But that means that this is happening in a parallel world. So I'm kind of torn about that for a couple reasons. One, if this is a parallel world and we are no longer in the world we've spent 23 episodes on, that means we're never going to find out what the letter was, because that's often parallel world land. We're never going to find out what that letter was. That pisses me off. I want to find out what that letter was, because I'm like, but the letter, the whole point, you're just going to leave it to where we never know? What? So that makes me mad. The other thing is, I like the again, my opinions between now and next episode may change dramatically. So please keep that in mind. Please do not take what I'm about to say as the gospel. It will likely change next week. Please know that. But episode 23, when Raffle comes back as Novak's vision, it makes so much sense. Novak has carried this, he's bore this cross for 25 years. He's kept Raffle in his mind, this 12-year-old kid that influenced him and everything he did in the back of his mind all this time. It makes sense for Raffle to come back. And it felt like a big climactic, okay, Raffle came back as his hallucination. It all works. It all fits. It's symbolically beautiful. It's him talking to himself in his final moments. It's so beautifully done. At no point in the series, two things. At no point in the series had they alluded to the fact that we were going to go into a parallel world that was separate from whatever. Even if what the world we'd been in for 23 episodes was a fictional world, that's fine. If it was fictional Poland, that's fine. That's okay. They called it the P Kingdom at the beginning. And I'm like, okay, so it's fictional Poland. That's okay. Here, I guess last episode, at the end of the episode, when they gave an actual, this is this time, this place, Poland, I'm like, okay, that should have been a hint that we were going to a parallel world. I am reserving judgment until next week. I don't know how I feel about the show going from a fictional world to a parallel real world. I don't know if that's necessary. I don't know if that was necessary. I'm not sure yet if I would have rather seen the end epilogue of the fictional world and seen that letter and what it was and seen that go through. I don't know how I feel about that. I'm torn. I don't want to say too much of my own judgment because I want to wait and see what they do with this next episode. But the parallel world thing came out of nowhere. I was like, oh, we're doing this now. Okay, for 2 episodes in the final act. Okay. I do appreciate, I like the idea, and I don't want to get it twisted. I love the idea of Raffle coming back in a different form, because all of us, since episode 3, I'm sure all of us have asked the question, what if? What if Raffle was allowed to be an adult? How would he think about the world? What would he be like? Would he be like Bodini? Would he be like Aksha? Would he be like Hubert? What would he be like? However, this isn't the Raffle from the parallel world. This is this Raffle. So you can't really have your what if answer. You can't have your what if question answered because this isn't the Raffle that you saw in episodes 1 through 3. This is a different Raffle who we don't know his upbringing. He mentions it, but we don't exactly know it. So we don't know how he's different from episodes 1 through 3 Raffles. So you can't really say, oh, this is answering my what if question, because it's not the same Raffle. That's the thing. And I'm like, And he's kind of scary in this episode. He says some things I'm like, oh, uh-oh, that's given a red flag. We're going to talk about it here in a second. But my only thing is, as much as I like this concept of seeing an adult Raffle and what could have been, it's not what could have been because we're in a parallel world, so it's not the same raffle. And the other thing is, I just felt like the reveal in episode 23 of Raffle in the fire was so beautiful and so surprising and so perfect that this feels kind of tacked on as Raffle's back for real this time. And I'm like, is this a shonen now? Is this a shonen? Is this Bleach? I just, it cheapens the moment last episode of Raffle being there, of the actual spirit of Raffle from episodes 1 through 3. Even though that wasn't the real Raffle either. It was Novak's envisionment of it, but it's still tied to the actual world. This Raffle sort of, to me, in my opinion, this episode is it cheapens the Raffle of last episode that was so beautiful and poetic. This cheapens it a little bit for me, and I'm not a fan of it, but I'm going to try and keep an open mind because we still have one more episode to go and see how I feel, and I may completely change my mind next episode. We'll see. We'll see if we maybe get answers and what we do with that, but yeah. So this Raffle is, is like, oh, this is a good place to take a break. So we're basically getting to see what Raffle is like as a tutor. Also, the concept of the glass on the chair and how it ties to the poison that he took, like it's a direct reference. I was like, that's why it kind of confused me in a moment, because he talks about the astrolabe and he's like, do you like gazing at the stars too? And he's like, yes. He's like, I love it. And then he says, I was born in special circumstances. And I was like, okay, I was taken in by a scholar and I had an affluent lifestyle. So I was like, okay, this is basically, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't lonely. So this is kind of like the, what if Raffle never met Hubert? What if he was taken in by Pataki and allowed to do whatever? He's like, it was the stars that saved me because I was lonely. As for the why, I realized one day while I gazed at the sky, I realized that a world exists beyond our own. So it is kind of comforting to know that Raffle would have maybe came to these conclusions by himself, that we're not alone, and that feeling excited me. So I also am curious to see if heliocentrism will come back up in this world. So if we're in a parallel world, is heliocentrism going to come back up, or is it just going to die out with Novak? That the whole thing with heliocentrism is going to die out with them? Because I don't know how I feel about that. We'll see next episode. All the stars occupy the same sky. We must be connected by something bigger. Connected by something. Yep. And he's like, well, but I don't have any big goals like that. The records I make aren't useful for anything. And that they can't help anyone or serve the faith. And he's like, that means that they're meaningless. And here's another thing too. In my personal opinion, I would have done two things if it were me. Doesn't matter. I'm not the mangaka. And again, I may change my mind next episode. Please know that. But I would have dressed Raffle differently. I know that making him in the same clothes he was at as a 12-year-old is, but they do, seeing like Raffle as a 12-year-old just blown up. It's like he took the Mario mushroom and just do-do-do-do-do. He just got bigger after taking the Mario mushroom. I'm like, I would have put him in different clothes. Keep the same face, keep the same haircut, same voice actor if you want, or actress, and then just have different clothes. Since it's a parallel world, why does it matter? And the other thing is, I guess for me, I would have liked it to have been, you could have even called them Raffle. You could have called them Raffle. But said like, oh, here's your new tutor, Raffle. And they looked different. Like they had the same face, but like red hair or black hair, or they looked different. And it was like an incarnation or something like that. I would have personally, watching this episode, I would have liked that better. Again, I think it kind of cheapens us seeing Raffle last week and then seeing this parallel Bizarro World version of him, which is not really Bizarro World. He's like, then why do you keep records every day? And he's like, well, I don't know why. Little Albert is so cute. Bless his little heart. He's like, but I can't keep doing it for selfish reasons. And that's when Raffle teaches him about Sagittarius. And I like that Raffle like shows him the line. And he's like, well, doesn't it look like his bow and everything? And I like that Albert's like, no. That is a true, honest child explanation. A kid will be honest with you and be like, no, that looks dumb. And you're like, well, he's like, it is a bit of a stretch. And he says, but isn't it easier to remember now? See? He's like, I see these things and make connections through them. And I did read something where we talked about how humans love patterns. We love making things like have patterns or connections. That's just how we are as people. I think it was Hank Green talking about that. And how we create constellations as a way to explain these patterns and these orders. And this is kind of an example of that. He's like, how do our powers of reason work? What a question, right? How does that get defined? And he's like, constellations were associated with myths. We told stories. Everyone has a different story. We connect meaning and find it through these stories. Yes, I love that he brings that up. And he's like, Sagittarius is associated with Chiron, the centaur sage. And he's like, they never bow to challenges and passionately pursue universal truths. Do you understand how that feels? And Albert's like, I'm 7. So the answer is no. He says, according to ancient philosophers, we feel it when our bodies shudder in response to the beauty of the universe. I love that line. I love how he describes the feeling of wonder that philosophy brings. This damn show makes me want to take philosophy grad courses, which girls, guys, they, thems. I wish I had the time. When our spirit compels us to get closer to that beauty. I also love this little moment here where he takes the question mark and he's like, in other words, it's the urge to stop and question. I'm like, when did you become a guest model? Like adult Raffle doing like the question mark and it kind of looks like the earth. That was super cute. God created this world and humankind seeks to understand it. I feel like regardless of your spirituality, regardless of your religion, this world does exist. And I do believe that it is part of humanity's job is to understand it and to try to make sense of it all. And I know of no nobler desire. And it's a question that will always be answered or always be asked and always people will be trying to answer it. But yeah, so the 2 cups on the table with the Vase definitely made me think of the poison. And when he grabs the poison cup, the cup here and says, and what does he say there? When he grabs the cup, he says, I'll pay any price, even if that price is life. That in itself, like originally, when I wasn't sure this was a parallel universe, I was like, so did Raffle like kill himself and stage his death so that he could go off and pursue his own dreams and whatever? Did he do that? Is that what this represents? But if you're looking at it as a parallel universe, it's him basically alluding to the fact that all along from the start, no matter what universe it is, Raffle is willing to give his life in pursuit of that knowledge and in pursuit of strengthening that understanding of the universe. It's also a little bit of a red flag because I'm like, did he kill Albert's dad because Albert's dad was trying to stifle that knowledge? If that ends up happening, then I can understand why Albert doesn't want to learn because this tutor that taught him all this ends up killing his dad. I would gladly toss it aside. I am glad that it's showing us that Raffle was always going to be like this from the start. He says, you don't know if what you're doing is useful. That line is pretty true. Like, again, there are things that both the dad and Raffle say that I'm like, ooh, those are kind of red flags. But then there are things where, like Raffle here, he's like, how do you know that what you're doing is meaningful? How do you know somebody's not going to get use out of it? You don't. So he's like, you know what? In response, I'm going to say something quite inappropriate. The idea that knowledge must be useful to other people or to society is nonsense. And Albert's like, you're going against what my dad said. That's crazy. And then he's like, it's fine. Remember this. When it comes to the pursuit of truth, one thing is important. You've got to believe. And it's the same thing as the dad. The same pose, the parallels. Yep. No matter what happens, I would never criticize your curiosity. So yeah. And then he asked them if they want to do algebra. And he's like, actually, I want to learn more about the stars. Because he don't stifle the curiosity. So Albert keeps getting tutored by Raffle. You've mastered the quadrature. I'm like, mastering the quadrature? You're like 8 years old. I was like in high school going, what is this? But he's like, numbers, mastering numbers is like unlocking the secrets to the cosmos. And I'm like, yes, astrology, that, physics has a lot to do with those as well. He's like, it's like the urge to learn comes naturally. Yes, people want to learn. Now, this smile here that Raffle gives, being like, that's wonderful, that's a sinister smile. I was like, why are we framing Raffle this way? Our precocious little bean. This is not him. This is Otherworld Raffle. I'm like, And he's like, there's a small meeting happening tomorrow where others sharing the same motivation will gather. Again, the dad, I feel, even though I don't agree with everything the dad is saying, I feel like some of what the dad was offering up was with the underlying current of I'm protecting my child from the outside world. I believe in that. I don't know if others believe that, but I do, because he's a dad and he seems to care about his son. But Raffle is kind of the opposite, and he's like, hey, let's go to this meeting of all these minds. Could be busted by the police, could get you in a lot of trouble, could put you in a dangerous situation. You're young enough. You've got good ideas. Let's go. Let's not waste time. I feel like that's, endangering this poor kid. And you can even experiment with thoughts that would be dangerous elsewhere. To take a little small child there, I'm like, Raffle, should you be trusted with children? Should you be trusted with children? I don't know. He's like, you seem to have what it takes. And I was like, are you Professor Oak telling Ash Ketchum he needs to take this Bulbasaur and go out and battle adults? That's what it feels like. So they go to this building. He also talked about THAUMAZEIN. I don't want to end the episode without talking about that. With that existing, it's supposed to be marvelous. So, one on the saying that philosophy begins in THAUMAZEIN, which is from Socrates. It's about wonder, the wonderful words that face in opposite directions at one and the same time. Like Janus and the androgynous creature of whom Aristophanes tells in Symposium. It's been a long time since I read Symposium. That's a treat. It's possible to use it in the opposite senses at once. THAUMAZEIN both opens our eyes wide and plunges us into the dark. I love that. This is from After All, which was published in 2002 from the University of Chicago Press. This article was. It says, reflection on it might as well have made Theaetetus his head swim as much as does the Aperarius. Socrates leads him into the pages, culminating in 155 in their exclamation, by the gods, Socrates, I am lost in wonder, which is where that word comes from. When I think of all these things, it sometimes makes me quite dizzy. So yeah, just talking about this astonishment, as Aristotle says, provoked. According to him, the difficulties that arose from early philosophers were first to do with matters close at hand, but later concerned remoter questions about, for example, the genesis of the universe. As with Plato, it's often that the form of the apparent contradictions, such as the prospect of dolls at a puppet show behaving as though they were alive, and the ideas that the diagonal of a square is incommensurable with the side. When the cause of the puppet's movements have been revealed, and we have learned the little geometry, our astonishment disappears. What would astonish us then is the suggestion that what we now know to believe is possible is not. I like this idea about puzzlement because, yeah, it's sort of like a mystery. It's like as soon as you figure out the magic trick, you're like, oh, that's it. And you kind of move on. As soon as you satisfy that urge to solve that mystery, you're kind of done. You're ready to move on. So you constantly need to keep searching and finding things that make you curious and wonder, because that will keep you thinking. That will keep that spark alive within you. That's the human spirit. So yeah, and then when they walk in, like there's a girl here that looks kind of like Yolenta. She's sitting there. There's a guy whose hair is kind of the same as the one dude that was with Schmidt. Like there's people here that look very similar to people we've seen in previous, like there's more women. There's a whole bunch of people there just talking. It's interesting. But yeah, so the question is, like, you've brought this little kid here. What is he going to learn? What's the point? How does this lead to his dad dying? And how are we ending this series in episode 25? Like I said, I'm not mad with the whole parallel universe thing. I was quite confused about it in the reaction. I'm not mad at it. I'm more bewildered as to why the mangaka chose to have this short segment, and it deviates so much from the original story. But again, we have one more episode, so we need to take time to kind of break that down. So, yeah. I let White Boy Kun take a break this week. They've been doing a lot during Jujutsu Kaisen, so they get a break this week. But I am very curious to know. This is going to be a hard comment section because I know some people are going to try to explain things and all that, but I want to frame it as hypothetical, I guess. If you hypothetically believe this is a parallel universe, what are your thoughts? If you hypothetically think it's not a parallel universe, what are your thoughts? I don't want people being like, well, actually, this is what it is, because I have one more episode to go. After I finish episode 25, you can actually all you want to, and I won't be mad. So... But I want my wonder to stay unsatiated so that we have the next episode in the series. But what? Again, Orb keeps me on my toes. I will say that. So we got one more episode left, and I'm excited to see where it goes to. But I've talked for an hour. I hope you all enjoyed my rambles and befuddling amusements. So anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah... I can't believe it, but I will be back next week with the series finale of Orb on the movements of the Earth. And I'll see you then.